welcome back to Quiz Gentry Friends. Today, let's dive a little deeper into some Titanic's trivia facts and iceberg analytics with 25 questions and 7 seconds each to answer them, but before then, you may please consider subscribing for more maritime quizzes as we get started. First question here says, what warning did Titanic receive about ice? Was it dense pack, clear seas, or ice fields? Ice fields. Titanic received warnings of ice fields ahead from nearby ships, but Captain Edward Smith decided to maintain the ship's high speed, believing the vessel was unsinkable. The lack of urgency in responding to these warnings played a key role in the ensuing disaster. 2. Where was the iceberg first spotted? Northwest, southeast, or northeast? Southeast. The iceberg was spotted directly ahead in the southeast, too late for the Titanic to alter course effectively. Given the ship's size and the speed it was traveling, even small course corrections couldn't prevent a catastrophic impact. How long did it take to spot the iceberg after the warning? We have 37 seconds, 40 seconds, or 50 seconds. "37 seconds. It took the Titanic crew only 37 seconds to spot and react to the iceberg after the lookout rang the warning bell. However, given the ship's speed and size, 37 seconds was insufficient time to make a full evasive maneuver. What color was the iceberg that Titanic hit? Blue, white, or black? Yes, it's blue. The iceberg was a deep blue, which indicated its composition. Blue icebergs are denser, having undergone heavy compression over centuries, making them more dangerous to ships because of their immense strength and submerged bulk. 5. How many lifeboats did Titanic carry for evacuation? 20, 22, and 24 are your options. "20 is correct. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, which was enough for about half the passengers and crew on board. This was well below the number required for a full evacuation, contributing significantly to the high death toll when the ship sank. What was the response time to the iceberg warning? 37 seconds, 30 seconds, or 20 seconds? "37 seconds it was. After the lookout spotted the iceberg, the Titanic crew had just 37 seconds to respond before impact. Despite urgent attempts to steer away, the ship was moving too fast to avoid a collision, and the iceberg's submerged portion made the situation worse. Who first spotted the iceberg? Was it the fleet, Moody, or Lightoller? It was the fleet. Frederick Fleet, stationed in the crow's nest, was the first to spot the iceberg. He rang the warning bell 3 times and called the bridge, but the ship was already too close to the iceberg to avoid it completely, resulting in a fatal scrape along the hull. What was the iceberg's initial trajectory? Options are westward, southward, or eastward. Southward. The iceberg was drifting southward from Greenland, carried by ocean currents. Many icebergs from this region make their way into shipping lanes each year, especially during spring, making the North Atlantic notoriously dangerous for ocean liners like the Titanic. What was the iceberg's density compared to seawater? Higher, lower, or equal? It was higher. Icebergs have a much higher density than seawater, meaning that most of their bulk is hidden beneath the surface. This made the Titanic's iceberg particularly hard to detect at night, as only a small portion was visible above water, contributing to the disaster. Question 10. How far away was the iceberg when spotted? 500 meters, 300 meters, or 1,000 meters? "500 meters. The iceberg was about 500 meters away when spotted by the lookout. Despite this distance, the Titanic's high speed and the crew's limited response time made it nearly impossible to steer clear, and the ship struck the iceberg's submerged part, leading to flooding. What was the water depth where Titanic sank? 12,500 feet, 10,000 feet, or 15,000 feet? 12,500 feet. Titanic sank in 12,500 feet of water in the North Atlantic. This depth made rescue efforts impossible at the time, and it wasn't until 1985, over 70 years later, that the wreck was discovered by an expedition led by Dr. Robert Ballard. How many icebergs were in the area that night? 300, 400, or 500? 400. Around 400 icebergs were reported in the vicinity of Titanic's path that night, a perilous concentration for ships. The lack of moonlight and calm seas made icebergs difficult to see, as they lacked telltale waves breaking against them. What was the water temperature when Titanic sank? 28° Fahrenheit, 32° Fahrenheit, or 34° Fahrenheit? 28° Fahrenheit. The water temperature was 28° Fahrenheit, below the freezing point of fresh water but still liquid due to its salt content. This frigid temperature caused death by hypothermia within minutes for those who were in the water after the sinking. What was the iceberg's composition? Do you think it was glacial, sea, or snow? Glacial. The iceberg was composed of glacial ice, which is denser and harder than typical sea ice. Icebergs of this type are formed from snow compacted over centuries, making them massive and dangerous obstacles for ships, especially under low visibility conditions. 15. What was the estimated height of the iceberg above water? Please like the video. Thank you. 100 feet. The iceberg's visible height above water was around 100 feet, but icebergs typically have 90% of their mass submerged, meaning this iceberg was far larger than what was visible, making it a formidable danger, despite its deceptively small appearance above the surface. How far was the iceberg from its point of origin? 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles, or 3,000 miles? 2,000 miles. The iceberg had drifted about 2,000 miles from its point of origin near Greenland, carried by ocean currents and winds. Many icebergs in this region follow a similar route into the North Atlantic, often breaking off from glaciers due to warmer temperatures. What was the iceberg's surface area above water? Please consider subscribing. Thank you. 12,000 square feet. The iceberg had a surface area of approximately 12,000 square feet above water, making it a massive floating hazard. Its true size was far larger beneath the surface, with the majority of its mass submerged, contributing to the difficulty in detecting it. How fast was Titanic going when it hit the iceberg? 22 knots, 20 knots, or 25 knots? 22 knots. Titanic was traveling at 22 knots, 25 miles per hour, when it hit the iceberg. Many experts believe that this speed was too high given the known ice warnings, and had the ship been going slower, the crew might have had more time to avoid the collision. How far did the iceberg breach below waterline? 20 feet, 50 feet, or 30 feet? 20 feet. The iceberg breached 20 feet below the waterline, tearing a gash in Titanic's hull across 5 compartments. This breach allowed water to flood the ship's lower sections, overwhelming its design and leading to its sinking within a few hours. 20. What type of ice was the iceberg made of? Do not forget to comment your score. Glacial ice. The iceberg was composed of glacial ice, denser than sea ice. Glacial ice forms over long periods of time as layers of snow accumulate and compress, creating ice that is much more compact and harder, which made the iceberg particularly destructive in the collision. Where was the iceberg sighted first? North Atlantic, Greenland, or Antarctic? North Atlantic. The iceberg was sighted in the North Atlantic, where it had drifted into one of the busiest shipping lanes of the time. Icebergs are common in this region during spring, as pieces of glaciers from Greenland break off and drift southward. What was the iceberg's estimated volume? 500,000 cubic meters, 1 million cubic meters, or 700,000 cubic meters? 1 million cubic meters. The iceberg had an estimated volume of 1 million cubic meters, making it a massive structure that was mostly submerged beneath the ocean surface. Only a fraction of the iceberg was visible above water, a factor that made it more difficult to detect at night. How much time passed between impact and distress call? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes? 10 minutes. Titanic sent out its first distress call 10 minutes after impact. The crew used the ship's Marconi wireless system to send up a SOS signal, but due to the ship's remote location, nearby vessels couldn't reach the scene in time to save all passengers. How many degrees did Titanic turn before impact? 10 degrees, 5 degrees, or 20 degrees? 10 degrees. Titanic turned 10 degrees to port after the iceberg was spotted. This small change wasn't enough to avoid the collision, and the ship's hull scraped along the iceberg, opening a series of gashes below the waterline that ultimately caused the ship to sink. The last question here says, how large was the iceberg Titanic collided with? 1,000 tons, 500 tons, or 2,000 tons? 1,000 tons. The iceberg that collided with Titanic was estimated to weigh about 1,000 tons, but this is just the visible portion. Icebergs are typically much larger below the surface, and the submerged part of this one contributed to the severity of the damage inflicted. Thank you for watching, friends. See you in the next quiz. Bye-bye.